Artificial intelligence, or AI, has come roaring back in the news with the recent launch of ChatGPT, the AI chat box that gives surprisingly human-like responses. AI in Africa offers tremendous opportunities to address challenges and advance development in ways never seen before. And it is flourishing, especially in the usual African tech hubs that excel at creating innovative solutions. But AI also comes with risks, and it often misses the nuances of non-Western regions. Hello, I'm Carol Pino. Welcome to our show, Africa USA Now, current events at the intersection of Africa and the United States. Our program is presented by the World Trade Center, Washington, D.C., and supported by the African Development Bank and the Africa Investment Forum. We're now in the fourth industrial revolution, with disruptive technologies enhanced by AI rapidly changing almost every aspect of the way that we live. In Africa, AI could be truly life-changing, solving development challenges that have confounded experts for decades. According to the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, if the continent captured just 10% of the global AI market, it could add $1.5 trillion to Africa's economy by 2030. That potential increase is a whopping 50% of current GDP. African governments and businesses are seeing AI as a chance to truly transform the continent. Look at the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that aims to wipe away cross-border trade barriers. AI is already making the movement of people and goods far more efficient. There are applications in health, agriculture, education, energy distribution, you name it. What about the risks? AI is only as smart as the data used to train it, so biases and low data matter. AI clearly favors languages and accents from the global north, and it is proven seriously lacking in facial recognition of non-white faces. We have three extraordinary experts joining us for our conversation today. Alex Sato, futurist and co-founder of Alliance for AI and Ahura AI. Lanre Ogungbi, co-founder and CEO of Identity Pass. And Andrew Barden, lead organizer and content director for the Africa FinTech Summit. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Let's begin with the African AI landscape. I'd love to hear from each of you on your current favorite AI project in Africa, whether you're involved in it or just heard about it. Alex, what are you finding? What's your favorite that you've heard about lately?
If I may give you very quick fun facts, Umoja Hackathon, which is being run by Zindi.Africa, is bringing over 200 universities and about 2,000 students to do a hackathon on AI. That's happening in mid-March, right? The second one is Data Science Nigeria. It's a community that has now trained over 100,000 data scientists to come out of Nigeria. And then finally is InstaDeep out of Tunisia, a company we had invested in back in 2018. They just exited about a month ago for over $600 million, right? And people will say there's not AI coming out of Africa. And so our nonprofit Alliance for AI really was put together to bring together all this kind of fun facts so we can show the world that there is AI coming out of Africa.
That is amazing. Andrew, what are you seeing in the fintech sector?
I'm very invested and interested in what's going on in insurance, particularly, and how insurtech is being applied in various ways. We have companies like Curacell in Nigeria, which recently raised $3 million seed round. And one of the things they do is they use AI to accelerate the claims process. In addition, you have other companies like Modasure here in Kent. Modasure uses AI-powered chatbot to sell insurance. So that's where I'm interested in.
Lanre, I have to give you at least two examples because you have to tell us about your company and then another fun one.
Yes, like you said, my company has very interesting input in terms of how we use AI, especially in digital identity, recognizing people. Today we have biometrics technology, facial recognition that are not tailored towards, African community or, the African market itself generally. I've met people that can't unlock their phones with their faces because, they have tribal marks on their faces. And when building some of this AI technology, sometimes, if you're in a different country, you've never seen someone with tribal marks. You don't even know how to, have that into your AI. We've been able to use AI to solve, biometrics technology, and also be able to, stop fraud and improve our entire digital identity activities. The second project is we're going towards something called behavioral KYC, using AI to understand, where do you come from, where's your background, and literally using that to come up with thousands of questions that pertains only to you, right? And so data verification is called knowledge-based authentication and verification, and that's also an application of AI.
Alex, one thing that people say is that, well, there isn't enough penetration of 5G, and you really need 5G capabilities in order to have the huge data flows that are necessary for AI. So how are these companies working it?
Yes, I usually respond saying that is completely wrong. It's really around context, design for context. How do you design for the market you're trying to get into, right? And so WhatsApp, for example, has over 90% penetration in most African countries. So you can deploy your AI solutions through WhatsApp and it would reach almost everyone in the country. In fact, another fun fact, there is a company called Fundamate. They deployed a solution that is pretty much like ChatGPT 3. Before ChatGPT 3 was launched, they already had 1 million users in Africa, right? Answering questions for school students through WhatsApp. So we got there first. I think of all these technologies as being seeded by knowledge from different parts of the world. And the piece that you can attribute to Africa is going back in time before 1000 BC. There's a culture in Nigeria called Yoruba, and there's a religion called, I think it's the Ifa, worship of Ifa. The way they communicated was based on binary code. And binary code is what computer science is built on.
Andrew, what are you finding that AI is bringing to fintech companies?
So AI is being leveraged, from my point of view, in 5 different ways, I would say, in fintech directly. One of which is lending and finance. Second of which is insurance. Third, financial welfare. Then security and fraud prevention. And also in customer intel and experience. So these are really popular areas at the moment that we're seeing AI being used. Because at the moment, about 80% of MSMEs in Africa do not have access to the necessary finance they need to grow and properly run their businesses. And with companies like Lulalind in South Africa, they recently raised $35 million Series V. They use AI in their, automated business lending practice in a way to process and manage cash flow. So there's a lot of ways this can be used. Additionally, the credit scoring models of the West do not work in Africa at all. I was in Ethiopia, and one of the credit rating models that was being used there at the time, you would be rated better the more wives you had, because it was a sign of financial stability. One of the Western credit, rating agencies, they would think you were crazy for doing something like that.
Literally, people think that there's no way to get data in Africa, and yet you do. So how did you go about being able to figure this out, to get identity? I mean, this is one of the most crucial issues.
There's a lot of problems with getting data, right? But that doesn't mean that it's impossible. Over 800 million people globally do not have any form of ID. You know who they are. 85% of that number stays in sub-Saharan Africa, right? And that was one of the biggest challenges that we, that I saw when we started Enterprise. People are shut out from all their global products and services just because these companies claim that, they can't verify them. So, for instance, if I go to, Lagos right now, I don't have anything called Instagram commerce. Some streaming platforms are just not available in my location. And the excuse is, well, we can verify people. But this data exists. You have to bring people into the circle. The child in Nairobi or Kigali, Lagos, automatically they should go into the database. Then you have the digitalization of this process and using it to verify people as they grow on, for any services, right? We merge everything into APIs, into secure infrastructures, and working with government thoroughly.
AI technology, like any technology, can have potential risks and challenges when implemented in any region, including Africa. These risks and challenges may be related to ethical, technical, and societal aspects. One of the ethical risks of AI in Africa could be related to the potential misuse of technology, such as using it to violate people's privacy or discriminating against certain groups. Additionally, there may be concerns regarding data privacy and security, as well as the potential for job displacement. Now, everything I've just said was actually written by the AI program ChatGPT in response to my question, what are the risks of AI in Africa? I asked ChatGPT several questions, and the responses were somewhat balanced, and there was a bit of nuance. But when I typed in, tell me a story about Africa, the result was pure stereotype. So, Alex, you've done a lot of work on this. How much is AI getting right or wrong about Africa?
It's less about AI getting it right or wrong and more the teams that design it. When you're building an AI solution, you have to ensure that the team is representative of the people who are using it. That is my silver bullet. I hope people adopt it. Because when you do that, you will have someone in the room who calls out assumptions you're making that make no sense.
And Lanre, you were talking earlier about tribal markings, things like that, make it so that people can't recognize faces. What other things do you see?
The level of bias that AI system needs to be almost like zero, right? And to achieve that means that everybody needs to be represented, both in the build-up process, right, and also even in the data being used to train AI, right? Because the level of intelligence is also based on the number of data that you get. So while we talk about AI, or really happy and optimistic about how it's going to change the entire economy, we also need to talk about how do we get balanced data that would go into AI itself. And another risk in which that I see is allowing AI to make decisions. One thing I'm really advocating for is not to allow AI to be the one to decide who do you hire, how do you hire, what gender do you hire, who do you fire? Just because when AI sees your performance KPI, for instance, you just assume, hey, you're useless, you have to be fired. Meanwhile, you most likely perhaps have, some other things going on in your life. And there's so many ways in which you can mitigate that.
Talking about mitigations instead of just the risks. The first one that motivated me to get into all of this is in healthcare. Healthcare solutions getting built without data from people who look like me are not going to work for me. I said, even to the elite, right? You are the elite in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Senegal. You are Black, and you are used to traveling to the UK to use the state-of-the-art medical solutions there. In the future, as we build with AI, it's all getting built with your data. That's not going to work for you in the future, for you and your children. So if you want to survive, you must invest in AI technologists in your country to build solutions for you, because the old medicine is not going to work.
I also want to mention, in this age of kind of digitization of the continent, a lot of things have been pen and paper for many years. And so in the process of digitizing, we have more data that we're able to train AI on and so forth. Companies like 54G and such that, their job is find this data and make it to where the AI programs and data analysts can get in there and understand it and actually use it.
Andrew, you actually had brought up something outside of the tech part of this, but it does relate to it, that investors, there's such FOMO, fear of missing out, that they'll invest without knowing anything. Tell us about your experience with that, because that is a danger when it comes to tech.
Yes, there is, an intense FOMO around that. We just had one of the best months in fundraising for startups on the continent. So, while the rest of the world is seeing quite a bit of slowdown in venture capital money, there is still so much work to be done here. And I think international investors are starting to recognize that and to start giving Africa its due kind of focus in terms of venture capital investment. But one of the cool things that I think we're seeing going on right now is kind of embedded AI. You know, in the fintech field, we've been using this term embedded fintech for years. You know, we're embedding payment processes into an e-commerce platform. We're embedding insurance into a mobility startup, stuff like that. Nowadays, we're embedding AI into fintech startups, into health tech startups, and so forth.
You had said that in your consulting business, that you have rules for who you will consult with.
You have to come here. You know, you can't sit in the United States and do business with Africa with never coming on the ground. That's where you get into issues of there's a mismatch over narrative and reality. One of the ways we can kind of close that gap of the mismatch between narrative and reality is by bringing people here and showing them.
And Andrew just mentioned something. So in the last 5 years, funding that has gone to Black-owned, businesses, either you're in Africa or you're anywhere, it's just between 0.3 to 1%, according to the research. If you want to get African deals, then have a team in Africa. Have someone, even if it's an intern, have an intern in Africa. And the intern's role will be get me deals every week. And it's as simple as that, You can't keep saying that you do not have deals coming from this part of the world, but you do not have one representative. Your entire team is in New York and, San Francisco, and you want to have deals from Kigali or South Africa or Egypt. It wouldn't work.
We're seeing a lot more African companies also expanding into the United States, Flutterwave, Chipper Cash, and so forth. Additionally, us with the Africa FinTech Summit, we host one a year in the United States. There's no excuse,
If I might add to that, so much beauty comes out of this visit to the continent. You realize how much the media has painted your views the wrong way, and how much opportunity you're missing out on because you've not visited. In fact, recently I was in Kenya, and one of the many beautiful things I found there was a manufacturing setup to manufacture Raspberry Pis, right? Raspberry Pis are used by electrical engineers around the world to build circuitry. And that happened because the founder of Raspberry Pi was was brought to Kenya to visit. He saw what Gearbox could do and then set up shop there. And that is the first place outside of the UK and Japan where Raspberry Pis get manufactured now. And it came from that visit.
Alex, in thinking about ChatGPT, Africans have been saying Africans need to tell their own story because the world has such a gap in perception. When you start getting machine language tools, are you now going to be fighting machines too?
Exactly. You are going to be fighting machines too. But the good thing is you can. ChatGPT 3 was built on what they call knowledge from the whole world, and knowledge from the whole world is biased against Africa. That's exactly what it is. But then you can take these models and use different techniques like transfer learning to build on top of them, right? By supplying your own data. And when you feed it on top of that, it will then give you better answers to the questions that you ask.
AI in Africa clearly offers some tremendous benefits, albeit with risks. So what is needed to be able to harness those opportunities while still minimizing the risks? Mauritius was the first African country to come out with a national strategy for AI, and several others have followed suit. Recently, the African Union High-Level Panel on Emerging Technologies has developed a continent-wide strategy. Governments are pushing to create tech ecosystems to attract businesses and investment in AI technologies. Research hubs and smart cities are popping up throughout Africa. And there are programs to educate the next generation in AI, such as Data Science Nigeria, that aims to train 1 million AI personnel. Last year, the UN Economic Commission for Africa launched the continent's first AI research center in Brazzaville, Congo. So, Lanre, what is needed to get Africa where it needs to go?
So There are a couple of things that, in my opinion, of course, we know data, number one. There's already a huge financial gap that exists. A couple of policies needs to be put in place, right? There's so many, African countries that need to accelerate their policies when it comes to data laws. African countries are, using AI. University of Lagos, one of the first schools, university that I know, at least in my opinion, that has a dedicated org strictly for AI. And lastly, would be the fact that those that are creating, innovative ideas for AI should ensure that they're very intentional about, limiting the level of bias that already exists today in the entire technology space.
Andrew, what are you seeing as far as national strategy plans or policies that are going into this?
There's a lot of work to do when it comes to regulation. Our role is helping educate regulators. Oftentimes, innovation moves much faster than, some regulators are moving. And regulators are often trying to catch up in a way. And this oftentimes negatively impacts, innovation and the progress of the private sector. So I think one of the big conversations we need to be having over the next few years is kind of sitting down with regulators, make sure that they know, hey, these are the risks of AI. These are the things that are directly going to affect you. These are the things that are directly going to affect the consumers that, as the regulator, your job is to protect, and how you're able to build a responsible framework that works for both the private and public sector and doesn't hinder innovation too much.
Yes, and the piece Andrew just mentioned is a global challenge, by the way. In the US and DC, they need to work with the engineers to understand what's going on. In terms of Africa, with Alliance for AI, we first worked on this with the Africa Union in 2019, South Africa in 2020, and the Smart Africa Initiative from Rwanda in 2021. Basically working on the Africa AI blueprint is what they called it. And the piece of representation became so much more important again. There were about 15 groups that worked with these government agencies, and most of them were from outside the continent, right? They were mostly European, Asian, and a few American groups. And so Alliance for AI was the only African group in the room, and it was so necessary to be that voice of the people. We kind of brought together a group of people in the Africa diaspora who are part of these mega companies around the world who have information about AI to advise the African government in addition to the many other groups from the world. And so it was important to have that voice in the room. Right now, the focus of all the groups coming into Africa is how do we make it easier to create and extract data. Nobody is thinking about building access to compute so Africans can build valuable solutions on top of the data. So that was our biggest suggestion, and I don't see it being implemented right now. I hope we continue pushing for it.
Leonard, the issue of regulations is not just something to look at Africa. What things do you face in other countries, and particularly the U.S.?
So many things. Just the way U.S., have been able to create incentives for, so many countries in the world, including United Nations, for conversations around green energy. We could also, create the same incentives for AI, that is so inclusive and makes the entire world, more inclusive than ever that we've ever been. Because the challenge of not doing it right now is in the next decade, the next 2 decades, 3 decades, we have technologies that do not recognize people that exist. We have technologies that naturally are already biased. And so, that's the danger of not doing it. And so that's probably one of the things that I think the US government can do. Secondly is knowledge transfer, right? There's a huge need for training. There's a huge need for knowledge transfer. If you want AI to move in the entire continent, you can. WhatsApp is really moving. Today, most people do something called mobile money transfer. If you make a transfer for somebody in the US on Friday, I'm sure you have to wait till Monday before you get it. But if you make a transfer for someone in Lagos, within less than a minute, you get it, right? that shows that these countries have the technology to make it work, even way better than countries like US. So one thing that the US can do, I think some of the policies that they need to do in relation with other countries is to be very intentional about knowledge transfer, right? Encourage other companies. I know Google, for instance, have created like hubs in Ghana and I think Kenya, precisely training hubs. Incentify more. There's so many other technology giants that can also come into the region and literally invest more.
Andrew, just looking towards the future, last words.
I think we're going to see a lot of public-private collaboration. For example, recently, the Central Bank of Kenya and Google were working together to block unlicensed lending apps from the Google Play Store. So I think just if we're talking generalists about technology, I think that's one of the ways that we're going to see momentum on the continent. Additionally, I think we're going to continue to see the evolution and the maturity of the African native technology sector, whether this be AI, whether this be fintech, health tech. We're just going to start seeing more and more large, African tech companies. This is when Africa is going to get its big tech players.
Lanre, as far as investors, what do you tell them about this sector?
Usually what I say is that we're building AI technology that has a direct impact on people. We're just sharing information, right? And I think, moving on, that is how we should mirror the AI solution. So we talked about people are hungry. We talked about, financial inclusion. We talked about, education. So the first thing we need to do is how can AI help us solve this? How can AI improve education, improve financial inclusion, improve, that is how usually I communicate to the VCs to say, that is what we need right now.
Alex, AI in the United States, in Europe, it changes our lives in ways that makes it a little easier, a little faster, a little more comfortable. But in Africa, it could really fundamentally change people's lives. How do you see AI going forward in Africa? How will it change the continent? How could Africa then find solutions that would change the world in the way of mobile banking that came out of Africa?
It's I see it as a choice that we have. Before 2018, before a number of people stepped up and started acting, we would have had a world where AI didn't work well for Africa. There was just solutions from the outside coming in that didn't work well for the people. It will increase digital divide. It will increase, wealth distribution. It will just, lack of better term, mess up the continent. But with the right people stepping up over the last 4 years, and I'm calling on more and more people to keep doing that, we will build AI that is rooted in use cases, in solving real problems that first and foremost people in African communities face. And then those solutions become solutions for the rest of the world. Larry just told you that in Nigeria and in Kenya, you can send money to someone else and they will receive it within minutes. I needed to send money to pay contractors last week, and I had to wait 2-3 days to make that happen, right? So in California, we need to adopt Kenyan technology. Very similarly, the health diagnostics space, one MRI machine is the cost to build 4 clinics in Kenya. So nobody's buying MRI machines. And so these guys built a tool on a phone that uses sound, right? You can place it on the back of your person. It captures the sound from their lungs and uses it to produce a medical image that can be used by a doctor, right? We need to export that from Kenya to California because I don't want to sit in an MRI machine for 45 minutes anymore, okay? I need to use African technology.
That brings us to the end of our program. Thank you so much to my guests, Alex Sado, futurist and co-founder of Alliance for AI and Aurora AI, Lanre Ogungbi, co-founder and CEO of Identity Pass, and Andrew Barden, lead organizer and content director for the Africa FinTech Summit. To our viewers in Africa, America, and around the world, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Carol Pinault, host and producer of Africa USA Now. Additional production by Kellen Cody and Nick Dunny. Associate production by Alessandra Salase and Alicia Gupta. Editing by Batsy Freddy. Graphics by Blessing Katsidzira. Africa USA Now is presented by the World Trade Center, Washington, D.C. You can find us on YouTube and your favorite podcast apps. Be sure to follow us and leave a review. A special thanks to the Africa Investment Forum for their support. Africa's investment marketplace is championed by the African Development Bank and its partners to accelerate the closure of the continent's investment gaps. Our production partners are Africa Global Schaefer and Pixie Corner. For more information on Africa USA Now, visit us at africausanow.com. We hope you've enjoyed the program and that you'll continue to tune in as we delve further into the intersection of Africa and the United States.